Hello, and welcome to the Plenty of Positivity podcast. I am your host, Courtney Beck, and today we have a very special guest, Dr. Joshua Hartzell. Dr. Hartzell is a keynote speaker. He is also a #1 best-selling author of A Prescription for Caring in Healthcare Leadership, and he is a certified executive coach, as well as a retired Army colonel who spent 25 years in military medicine. It is my absolute pleasure and honor to welcome Dr. Joshua Hartzell.
Well, Courtney, thanks for having me. And again, I love your work and the idea of positivity and spreading that. So I'm super excited to be here.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hartzell, for that kind compliment. I'm thrilled to have you on the podcast. Your book had the opportunity. I just want to make sure I get this in there. Fantastic book. We were just speaking right before this particular conversation. And what I really love about it is the topic of leadership, but as well as your background in medicine. But when I read it, I don't have that, extensive background in medicine, and it was so applicable to across so many different industries. So I cannot wait to speak about it, but I would love to start with an introduction and a background of yourself.
Well, definitely please call me Josh. Yeah, a little bit of background from me. So I grew up actually in a really small town in rural Pennsylvania, and I think that shaped a lot of who I am. I ended up going to Duquesne University and then to the Uniformed Services University Medical School, and spent like the next 21 years after my 4 years of medical school, 25 total in military medicine, where I spent a lot of time not only caring for patients, both as an internal medicine physician and as an infectious disease physician, but really getting into academic medicine and training medical students, graduate medical education trainees such as residents and fellows, and then ultimately sort of transitioned also into what we call faculty development, which is really just professional development. So I spent the last probably 5 to 10 years of my career working on how to help people become more effective teachers and leaders. And that is sort of now transitioned into a lot of the work that I've done once I left the military, where my real passion is helping people figure out how to become more effective leaders, both to improve their own personal life, but also to have an impact and improve the lives of the people they have the honor and privilege of leading.
That is fantastic. Thank you so much for that introduction. And I must mention, you said Pennsylvania, and my family is actually from a couple of small towns in Pennsylvania. So I really did. I think it's so nice to always start from that very beginning and to understand maybe even the influences our parents, our family had on us. And so I wanted to just start there first before we get into medicine per se. But was there anything that really stands out about maybe your childhood, your adolescence that would really shape you? Maybe it's lessons along the way or your parents' influence that would help you along your journey.
Yeah, Courtney, and I wonder in some respects, because I feel like you and I are aligned in our caring for other people, if that sort of small town upbringing didn't create that sense of value in us. Yeah, I think that growing up in a small community, you sort of looked out for each other, and you always felt like you were there to help everyone else out, when they needed it. Several examples that really influenced me when I was growing up. So my mom was a customer service manager at Walmart after being a stay-at-home mom really for most of my life. But she taught me a lot about how they took care of each other at work. And I just remember her giving me example after example of, hey, this happened to such and such employee, and here's what we're doing to help them and their family. Really wasn't about the work, but it
Okay.
was about how they took care of the team members that were there. And I think in some ways that just became like, I guess that's what you do. And very similarly, my dad, he was kind of one of those people who was just the go-to guy in the neighborhood. Like if somebody needed something, they would reach out to him, and his answer was like universally yes. So I think from the two of them, there was this idea of service and serving others, and I think that carried over throughout the rest of my um, sort of life, really.
No, that's fantastic. And there was a couple things as you were speaking, but this idea, I know when this conversation has been brought up, even with my father, that small town kind of feel, it's when also too a lot of families lived close to one another. So the cousins were in the backyard, if so to speak, you know? And he speaks about that a lot, but just the way that he was raised and how family was first. And I love how you speak about even in the workplace with your mother, how it was not just about work, but actually coming together as a community. And I feel like community is so incredibly important, especially today. But how they came together to help one another, and that stood out. And so, I'd love to transition. How did you actually get into medicine? Was there something or someone that inspired you to go in that particular direction?
So when I was, I think like ninth grade. So my mom had breast cancer when I was pretty young, and that clearly had an influence on my exposure to healthcare, and also this idea of what people who are suffering from illness go through. So clearly, my mom's early experience with cancer was one big factor. The other thing for me about healthcare and medicine in particular is I really enjoyed science. And as I explored science more and, you know, the human body and physiology, it sort of led naturally to it. But I think it's a combination of both. The other thing I would say is that, medicine is a people business. And I think part of me is just drawn again to this idea of like taking care of people and interacting with people and their family.
Absolutely. And I do. I just like I love starting from the very beginning and just the foundation upon where our careers take us. And with medicine, as I had mentioned, I mean, 25 years in military medicine. And so I am sure that you have so many different stories. But I would love to just start with maybe some leadership lessons that really stand out to you present day, that even when others are looking for advice or perhaps you mentor them, maybe you spend a lot of time speaking about, one lesson or a couple of lessons you'd like to share.
And you've mentioned a couple times about how our early experiences influence who we are as leaders. And I just want to emphasize that because I don't think often leaders reflect on why they lead the way they do. Like, what is it about your early experiences that have shaped you? And I'll put out there both in a positive way, but maybe in some cases not positive ways. So one of the things I really like to get leaders to think about, either when I'm speaking or when I'm coaching, is tell me about your lived experience. Tell me about your childhood. Tell me about influential people that you had in high school and college, in your work life, and really get them to reflect and think about how did all of those experiences shape you as you are. And then of those, which ones do we need to hold on to, but also which ones do we maybe need to move past to allow us to be more effective. So I'm really excited that you've mentioned that a few times because it's critical to understanding who we are as leaders before we can really lead the most effective way.
100%. And it reminds me too about the why behind what we do in life, and how during like challenging times, it's inevitable it'll happen, along the way, but how that could really help motivate us or to keep us inspired each and every morning when we wake up. We always could resort to that why, so to speak. And so, you know, I do like teaching. I love teaching. And I think it's so incredibly valuable that students are able to obviously learn in the classroom, all the textbook knowledge that can be obtained in a classroom, but then also pairing it up with the importance of lived experience. And so my question for you is, being in military medicine, 25 years, if you could speak about certain experiences, like lived experiences that really stand out, that maybe even translated into leadership lessons later on that really was not experienced in a classroom?
One of the ones, the reason why I'll mention this one is because it's one of the things that I see leaders maybe not be exposed to as much or struggle with, and it in a way it goes back to your point about the why. One of the things that we do really well in military medicine and within the military broader is we know what the mission is, and it's a clear mission, and sometimes that's lost in other organizations, other settings. But to me, like, that's sort of the foundation, right? Like, if I understand what our mission is, then my job as a leader, as a follower, everybody in our team is to accomplish that. And, one of the lessons I learned over my career was that consistently going back to that and reminding people of it can be really powerful. Like, why are we here? Well, we're here to serve for those going into harm's way. So if that's our mission, what are we doing today to prepare us for that? What are we doing today to make sure we meet that mission? And it can be a very motivating, but also centering activity. And the other thing I think it helps you do as leaders is prioritize your work,
Yes.
because there's so many things, right? We get distracted. Jim Collins wrote about this in Good to Great and other things. We sort of are good at things, and then as we're good at things, we add more and we add more, and then we lose focus. And so one of the keys I learned in military medicine was understand your mission and consistently remind the people in the organization what it is, and then use that to guide your decisions. So I think that would probably be one of the first things I learned, but also something that's, I don't want to say completely unique to the military, but it's something that we do very well in the military.
No, absolutely. And I think that's so important when you speak about like the mission and the vision to allow others to buy into that from the very beginning, but how important it is to repeat it along the way and to allow the individuals to even see like the daily tasks. I think about even just in a business perspective, but how those daily tasks actually contribute to those long term goals to ultimately achieve those long term results that are desired by maybe a corporation. And so, very valuable advice. And Dr. Dr. Hartzell, Josh, I will call you, but well deserved here. A prescription for caring in healthcare leadership, number one best-selling author. Huge congratulations to you. I would love to really dive into this. Why did you write this at this particular time? Is there something that was maybe going on in healthcare that really drove you to say, "Hey, I'm going to write a book about this"?
Yes. I, it was sort of a compilation of things. Over my career, and I would say this is probably true in every issue. uh, we're often very good at the technical aspects of things. So, like, for us, that's patient care. Most people are, they're great clinicians. They're amazing physicians, nurses, physical therapists. Similarly, I think if we go into other industries, like, they're good at what their job is,
Yes.
but the culture that supports people and allows them to do the work environment, all the challenges we have interpersonally. I mean, I've heard that's an issue sometimes. People have conflict and other things. All of those are leadership issues. And what I recognized over the course of my career, both personally, like experiencing it myself, but also talking with, hundreds, if not thousands, of other people within healthcare, was all the leadership challenges we had. And then you couple sort of those personal anecdotes with the data that suggest, burnout was rising, rising, rising. 50% of people within healthcare, certainly physicians, are considered burned out. The other day I saw, like, it's going down. Only 40 some percent are burned out. I'm like, we're excited that only 40% are burned out. So it's the revelation that leadership is what creates the environment or the culture to be successful with the patient care. And while we spend a ton of time helping people develop their clinical skills, most professions within medicine, physicians, nurses, et cetera, we don't spend as much time or nearly enough time on developing leadership skills. So the purpose behind the book was really to help fill that gap so that when people were struggling, uh, well, twofold. One, so if you were struggling, you could just in time go to the chapter in the book on that topic and read it. Like, here's 15 pages on how to give feedback. Here's 10 pages on how to mentor, coach, sponsor. Uh, Similarly, what I would love to think as well is that proactively you could read the book and then avert some of those problems from happening. Because a lot of what we're doing in medicine is playing catch up. And again, I think this is similar in other industries and professions, is that we end up having all these challenges because we weren't intentional upfront about leading in a way that could prevent them. So we need to have more primary prevention, both healthcare wise as well as leadership wise. But in the book was hopefully to do that, to allow people to lead more effectively, to create environments where we could thrive, which then allows patient care to improve. It's a win-win situation.
That is absolutely fantastic. And I love how you really emphasize the proactiveness versus reactiveness. And I think that's honestly, that could even translate into other fields, other different industries, but how important that is, especially in an environment today where technology is infiltrating different industries and it's changing things so incredibly quickly. And to think that if you have employees, or in obviously the case of medicine, but medical doctors that are really thinking like just ahead, even a little bit, but how that could really revolutionize different industries or at least help for that matter. So I'm so glad you mentioned reactiveness. And as I was showing this book, yes, I did have plenty of positivity, but I promise there is an actual purpose for it. So, Josh, I really did. There was one particular sentence it was pretty much at the beginning of the book, but I wanted to read it. And if you can maybe expand upon it. So, quote, remember that the central idea is that being a caring, inspired leader will improve the lives of those we lead in healthcare.
Yeah, I mean, that's sort of the thesis of the book, that if we take care of our people, then they can take care of the mission. And you asked earlier about lessons I learned in military medicine, and that was one that was sort of driven into me very early on. I mean, I did Reserve Officer Training Corps at Duquesne University, and I still remember vividly examples of my instructors making it a point about, hey, look, your job when you're a junior officer is to take care of the people you're leading. Your job is to check their feet on a road march. It's to make sure that they have food. It's you eat last. Like all these principles that were sort of instilled in me from the military. Honestly, in some ways, I think that took me a while to think about within the context of specifically what does that look like and how do you intentionally do it within medicine. And I think that was the idea when it sort of then clicked. It was like, okay, how do we lead with caring in medicine? What does that look like? Obviously, you can lead with caring in, if you're in the police department or fire department or you're in a law firm, wherever. This leadership approach, it's not just, as I like to say, it's not just a feel good thing, but it's actually evidence based leadership. There's data, and that's the other thing in the book, is that almost every chapter, while there are stories and anecdotes, there's a lot of data that supports these ideas as well. Because I think sometimes people hear this and they think, that's nice, it's kind of soft. To which I say, okay, well, here's the data. Like, you might think it's soft, but guess what? It actually works. I mean, coming from the healthcare field, we talk about evidence based medicine. So one of the concepts we're really trying to spread also is evidence based leadership. Like, not just your opinion or what you think works, but what does the data show us? So yeah, the whole idea from that sentence is just, what are the intentional things we can do to take care of people so that they can thrive? And again, once the healthcare team thrives, patients, trainees, everyone else will thrive as a benefit.
That's so true. And, I just even think about the idea of people today, just at the very core. Like I said, this could apply honestly to different industries and fields, but how people just want to be seen, valued, and heard. and how being present, demonstrating, care. In your book, you do such a phenomenal job of incorporating not only just research, but you even draw from extensive interviews, different leaders, as well as input from yourself and your own experience, of course, across 25 years of military medicine. And so I'm curious if there was maybe just a story or just an actual experience that somebody shared during the interviews that maybe you could expand upon and really stood out. Maybe it's one or two.
So I just want to first say that I felt extremely blessed for all the people who agreed to do interviews. Some of them I knew, uh, many I didn't, and they were all incredibly gracious, not only with their time, but just the candor and the willingness to share some really really powerful stories. So if any of them are listening, thank you again for that. Yeah, there's one story in particular that when I heard this story, I was just blown away. So Angela Costa was one of the people I interviewed. She's a tremendous nurse, executive leader. Um, Again, I had no relationship with her before this. I just cold called her and said, "Hey, I hear people think highly of you as a leader. I see you in this role. Would you be interested?" She said, "Yes." She told me a story and she told me many, but she gave me a story of one of her nurses was essentially her son was in a house at home by himself, and there was like a SWAT team going into a house like next door. So it's kind of a bad area in Pittsburgh, and her son was home alone. She was worried about him. And what I loved about the story was her response is like, "We have to get you there so you can be with your son and make sure he's safe." It was like, "Look, whatever's going on here at work, like we're gonna set that aside and we're gonna get you home." And that's what they did. Like they made sure she got home to take care of her son. Like again, I just think of, like you said, presence and caring about people. That was a clear indication. And she had other examples where they would make sure maybe employees or people who didn't have enough, um, stuff for Christmas, gifts for kids, things that are really important to people, but it's just not your job. Like, look, if you're a nurse executive leader or nurse leader, like it's not your job to make sure the people who work for you have Christmas gifts. But man, what a message does it send to them? And also, like, by the way, what a just incredibly human thing to do. And what would our world look like? I know this is your entire work. Like if more people just said like, "Hey, I see somebody in need. I'm going to fill that need."
That is so true, Josh. And, as I reflect just what you're saying, it really does. It seems like something that could really change if we all did that, even in organizations and businesses, companies, etc. But how you look at a human being as an individual first before they are an employee, before they are, a team member. And it reminds me from my own experience just in sport, but the leaders, the coaches that really do stand out are the ones that looked at you as an individual first before the athlete. And I really do. I think from the very beginning, how you were just talking about like the sense of community, but putting people first, even if it was in the workplace, like going back to your mother's story in the workplace, I think that's so incredibly powerful and such an important message. Like I said, I feel like, especially today. And so, as we move forward, I'm just is we have been speaking a lot about like caring inspired leadership. Is there maybe a misconception that sometimes comes up or sparks up that you would like to maybe clarify?
Yeah, I think I mentioned this earlier, this idea that, caring is soft. And I actually interviewed Amy Vertrees, who was a fellow Army officer with me. We knew each other from the Army. And when I was interviewing her, she said I think what you're saying is, and the way I look at caring is monumental. And what I loved about it is like, I mean, Amy is amazing. She's a surgeon, and her idea is like, look, caring is monumental strength. it's not soft. And what I like to tell people um, is it soft to give people feedback? Is it soft to embrace conflict? Is it soft to advocate for people on your team because they need resources or they need something else to help them do their job better? Is it soft to hold people accountable? And I think when people look at those, they clearly say, okay, none of those actions are soft, but all of them can be acts of caring. And the reason why I love this idea of caring is because most people, certainly in healthcare, right? Like if you ask anyone in healthcare, do you care about people? Yes. Right? I mean, absolutely. That's why we went into it.
Sure.
Okay, well, if you care about people, let's take that caring and transplant it to our leadership. And what it does then is then when you have these uncomfortable situations that are definitely not soft, you have to embrace them because you care about the individual. Like I saw you do this, Courtney, and I feel like, this is going to impact your career if I don't give you this feedback. Like the easy thing to do would be not to give you the feedback. Just avoid it, right? But if I really care about you, now I have to give you the feedback because I would feel really bad if I didn't give you the feedback. And if you found out that I didn't give you the feedback when I could have, you would probably be like, why, I thought you cared about me. Why would you not give this feedback? Um, so I think the idea that it's quote unquote soft is just really a huge myth. The other point I like to bring up about this is, and I use some examples in the book, some of the uh, what you might describe as like the hardest, toughest military leaders
Hmm.
talk about the importance of caring and caring for your people. And it's again, it's not about being, lovey-dovey with them, but it's about making sure that they get the right training so they come home safely. For us, it's about making sure they get the right training so they can best take care of patients. And again, we do those acts out of caring for them so that they can be successful, but also so that whatever the mission is can also be successful.
That's so true. And, as you're speaking, it reminds me of the importance of building like strong professional relationships, especially in the workplace, before anything else, before you start that even at first date, but really getting to know somebody. Because as you were mentioning, drawing in caring, inspired leadership. But you mentioned even if there's like an issue that arises or that I need feedback, and if you don't provide me that feedback, I can be left out. I feel like that's so important today with our communication. How if there is a certain level of trust that is established from the very beginning, and I trust that what you're providing as constructive feedback will certainly help me long term in my career, I'm willing to, like, take that in, and I do. I feel like it's today, it's this, like, nervousness of, like you said, if I don't know if I wanna even tell her, but I think that's what's so important, and I love how you pull in that caring, inspired leadership alongside of it because it's true. If there's trust built from the very beginning, you offer that constructive feedback with a sense of care, and I care. Wow. That's like that would be incredible, right? So I'm so happy you mentioned that, Josh.
Yeah, I mean, I think that would be the goal, and it would be incredible. And the statement I will make is, it's possible, right? Like we can do these things. What you just mentioned makes me, in some ways, characterize trust.
Yeah.
Trust is often what people describe as the foundation of any relationship, any leadership thing. I think part of what the idea here is that when people feel cared for, when you feel like somebody really cares about you, it builds trust. So caring is the avenue to create that foundation of trust. So if you're new to our organization and we demonstrate that we care about you, we want you to be successful, we do those things, we do daily intentional acts, you're more likely to trust us. And then to your point, when I come to you and say like, "Hey, maybe this wasn't done correctly," you don't all of a sudden, I mean, we can get into imposter syndrome and other things, right? But like you don't all of a
Sure.
sudden feel like, "My
Mhm.
God, they hate me. I'm done." It's like, "Oh no, like they're giving me feedback because they care about me. I trust them." So yeah, trust is foundational. Care is how we build that trust.
I really like that, how you just weaved everything together, because I do. I feel like, especially today, just with so many different generations in the workplace and how we've grown up so differently. I mean, there's generations right now that grew up with technology. And I mean, even as a millennial, like social media and stuff didn't really come until later. And so I think that's what's so important, is to really highlight the importance of communication, of that sense of trust, and how important relationship building is alongside of that care, because you mix everything together and that could allow an employee, a team to truly thrive. And so, across well over 20 years, but do you look back at your leadership philosophy and think, wow, it's really changed? Or perhaps it's actually just stayed the same?
It's definitely evolved over time. Early in my career, I would say I probably looked at leadership as more transactional. We do these things so we can get these things, or I do this so that you'll do this. Which, there's certainly transactional elements of our leadership, but that's somewhat limiting. And it's less, I think, as we just talked about, based on the relationships, but it's really all about the transaction. So for me, over time, it's become less about that and more about just this general approach to how do we create the culture where people can thrive, right? Uh, Early in my career, I would say I spent zero time thinking about culture. I thought a lot about interactions and like ones and twos interactions, but as I shifted my career, and probably part of this is just naturally, like I went from being a person who, was mainly a doer, a follower, to, leadership role, maybe a higher leadership role. And over time, what I saw was, yes, those individual interactions are always going to be critical, always. But it's the collective of those interactions that form our overall culture. And so I think that shift from one transactional and one interpersonal to thinking about it more strategically from a cultural perspective, definitely for me evolved over time. And as it evolved, the other thing that sort of came with that is, and this evolved too. Early in my career, I would say I winged it. I just I just did what I thought worked, and I did what I saw other people do, but I don't know that I really had like a intentional thought process behind it. And this idea of like in being intentional is probably only in like the last 5 years for me, where I really started thinking like, oh, like we can do these specific things. So for me, that idea of intentionality also has definitely become more a part of who I am as a leader, but also how I help to train others.
I really like how you mentioned transactional and intentional. So, with transactional, something I've been really thinking about lately when it comes to our communication with one another, and most importantly, our connection with one another. And that could be in a professional setting as well as in our personal life. But how the communication being in person, undivided attention, and how you are able to develop a stronger connection by going past that sense of the transaction, the surface level discussion, but really getting to know an individual. And I'm not saying like super personal, but I'm just saying to the point where it's a genuine conversation that kind of goes past that surface level. How are you today? Great. It's like kind of robotic, because I reflect and talk about being intentional, but even going to the grocery store, I have become more self-aware of how much like in a rush I am. I'm like, Courtney, why are you in a rush? I mean, these are human beings, checking you out as you obviously, pay for your groceries, but just to have a simple conversation. I mean, honestly, not even like sometimes 5 minutes. But how those short, small interactions really can play such a, or could have even a large impact on one's day. Like maybe somebody isn't having a good day, but a simple conversation is so important, but you make it intentional. And so I'm so glad you mentioned both of those particular words because I think they're extremely applicable to today. And when you talk about intentional, I just want to add one more thing is I know I could find myself in like kind of bombarded with different technology and notifications, distractions, but really being mindful and intentional that, okay, I have whatever, 30 minutes to finish XYZ. This is a priority and I need to get this done. And I think you really do have to be very intentional and how that like trait, if you will, could really help you today in life, you know?
100%. And, look, we're all really busy, right? We're really busy with everything we do. So, just to your point, like not only the intentional part about it, but we also need to sometimes step back and just like you did at the grocery store, like step back and ask ourselves, why am I doing this? Is it effective? But also step back and use that time to really think about, okay, what are my priorities for today? You know what? Right now, what I really need to do is stop everything and talk to Courtney because it's clear something is going on. I don't know what's going on, but she seems different. Let me just pause and see, right? I mean, I like how many times have you talked to somebody or you hear a story where somebody's struggling at work and you're like, well, this is weird. And then you find out that, someone in their family is sick or they're sick. Like there's something else that's impacting them. And to what you just mentioned, if we don't create the space where people feel safe to share that, it's not good for them and it's not good for us because it impacts their work. And also impacts how we would interact with them, right? Like if you knew somebody's, mom just died or grandmother was sick or they have a new diagnosis of cancer, your approach to them is going to be completely different, right? So I think just having that space and really communicating, which we don't really do well. I've been thinking a lot about communication since I wrote this book and, looking for resources to think about how do we do this better? Because it's really essential to everything thing we do.
That's so true. And, Josh, I really do. I just want to open up the floor as far as your book goes, because truly, I saw the passion from the very beginning, literally from like the first page, read it all the way through. And you're so passionate about what you're doing today, about really focusing on that caring, inspired leadership. So, is there anything that you would like to share with our listeners that you would like for them to hear about your book?
I'm going to go a little tangential here. It's
Sure.
related to the book, but it's also related to your podcast, which again, I really appreciate like the idea of positivity. And so when I was thinking about this, and I have a chapter in the book that's like be a positive force of energy, it reminded me sort of when I was deployed to Afghanistan. And, look, we didn't have running water. Which means we didn't have bathrooms. Initially, while I was there, we didn't really have food other than like MREs, which are meals ready to eat, essentially prefabricated food and like, packages. So there's two ways you can approach that situation, right? You can be really like, oh, this is terrible, woe's me. Or you can just be like, this is the situation. How are we going to get through it? How do we be our most positive selves? Because we have a mission to do, right? Like there's clearly a mission. So in the army, we have this phrase, embrace the suck. And to me, like that phrase, is sort of one of our ways of saying, look, yeah, this situation is not good,
Hmm.
but we can't change the situation. What we can change is how we react to it and how we move through it. Because all of these situations, no matter what we're in, inevitably end, right? Just like there, inevitably, we got better food, we got running water. Much to my chagrin, most of that was like right toward when I was leaving. But nonetheless, like the situation changes. So I think for your like listeners, the idea of positivity, how do we bring that positive attitude? Because as leaders, and this is in the book, Major General Jeff Clark said this, like we set the tone. So if you don't bring positive energy, it's just going to lower the energy for everybody else. The other thing that Dr. Julia DeGangi, who studies this, your positivity or your negativity is contagious. So as an infectious disease physician, right? Like, what do I want spreading in my organization? I want positive energy spreading. So if you're one of those people who can come into a room, brighten the room, bring that positive energy, like we need those types of leaders and followers. And I think, again, we every situation is not going to be the ideal, but we get to choose how we respond. And sometimes you just need to embrace the suck, move forward, and wait for the better day. But I thought for me, as I was thinking about the book and lessons and the work you're doing, like sort of that concept really would hopefully hit home.
Thanks so much, Josh. And, even just a reflection, I really do like speaking about positivity and a realistic sense. And you had mentioned it, but how those challenging, those difficult times in our lives, as well as the success, the, amazing experiences that we'll never forget in our life, but how both are temporary. And it's kind of to your point, like when you were mentioning just, the food situation and how one day you were going to have running water again. And I think that's a really good message because a lot of the times, especially when we talk about positivity, it could be like, oh, well, just be positive, that sense of toxic positivity. But at the same time, I think it is about addressing what is present in that moment, the emotions that you're going through, the difficult times. What could you learn from those difficult times? But ultimately, to know, at least I hold on to the fact of when I am going through a challenging or difficult time, that it's temporary. And what can I learn from this lesson that's trying to be taught to me, even though maybe I don't pay attention to it? But truly, I mean, that's how we grow in life. And that's why we're all here, is to learn from each experience that we have. And so, I'm so curious. We spoke so much about leadership, about medicine in general, and your experiences in military medicine. But I would love to hear, what do you like doing outside of career? Do you have any hobbies, anything fun?
My biggest hobbies are taking care of my kids. I have a 16-year-old son and a 13-year-old daughter who keep me plenty busy. I like to joke that I'm sometimes an Uber driver at night. Uh, but aside from that, and I'm actually teaching my son how to drive right now, which if any listeners have advice, please reach out to me. Um, I think the really the things I love to do, like that keep me sort of grounded and sort of help fuel me. Like I love to exercise. So I'm not a huge runner, but as I tell people, I love to eat, so I run. So I will run intermittently. I love to go to the gym. So any sport related activity is usually fun for me. I just mentioned food. I actually really get a lot of enjoyment out of cooking. So it's summer season, which to me is grill season. I'm already really excited. I just got a new grill, so I plan on doing a lot of grilling this summer. And then the other, I would say, activity that I really enjoy and I try to make time for is just reading. I love to read, still, mainly history, but also like if there's another good book that someone recommends, sometimes I'll try it. But yeah, just I would say those are the biggest things that I try to do. And, you know, I will, for exercise, like that's a priority for me because I know internally that if I don't exercise, really if I go more than 2 days, I can feel it. I just don't feel as well. My level of sort of patience lowers. So yeah, exercise is really important.
100%. As you were even mentioning exercise, I was thinking I love to exercise in the mornings because it really does, like kind of what you were saying about the patience aspect. And for me, it sets the tone to my day. And I don't know, I really do. I was talking about this recently, but when I know that I have to, like, essentially just block off my schedule and I know when something absolutely needs to get done. It's the same thing for my exercise in the morning, but when I know that I have to exercise for, a certain amount of time, it sets the tone of my day. And I will say, it kind of keeps me organized. What you were saying with like patience, it's really interesting. It's kind of a lifestyle change ever since I've really taken to running. But it does, I think it could exercise in general can make you feel good. And that could ultimately kind of trickle into whether it's career, whether it's family, spending time with family. So I'm so happy that you did that. You mentioned just how important general exercise is for one's health.
And I love what you just said about putting it on your schedule. Someone taught me this early in my career, and that was like, if it's important to you, put it on your calendar in your schedule. So I generally block. I mean, I don't now. I just kind of have that time set aside. But like, yeah, this hour is going to be when I go to the gym, or this hour is when I'm going to be, running or Peloton or whatever it is today, because I like the variety. But yeah, put it on your schedule, and then like, don't let something else take it off.
It's so true. And it reminds me, and I'm sure you could definitely relate, but when you were going through like medical school, but I know when I was in school, I would get so overwhelmed when, you begin a class and you see what you ultimately have to achieve in the class, and you look at, oh my goodness, this whole semester, like how am I going to get through this? But it taught me so much about life as I would move forward, but how important it is, exactly like you were saying, but to kind of compartmentalize your particular schedule and how like what actually needs to be prioritized. And when you are able to do that and taking those baby steps, looking at just, a couple days out, maybe just a week out, and not the big pies, so to speak, like taking a big chunk out of the pie, it to me, it really helped me. And I'm just curious, do you have any strategies as you were going through school or just in life that really helped you?
I have many. Uh, Most of them were. I do a talk on time management, and I begin the talk saying like most of these are lessons learned the hard way. Uh, the probably the most important thing I learned over time, similar to what you just said, is like you have to prioritize really well, which I did not do early on. I just did. I never said no. I didn't set aside time for things. Now I do. I didn't really have a plan. This is probably one of the biggest lessons I learned is actually be strategic about it. So set aside some time and plan and schedule. And I'm with you. Like people ask about writing the book, and I say, look, everyone's done hard things. Just set aside the time, like, and be disciplined. Atomic Habits is one of my favorite books all time. And those incremental gains, just like fitness gains or whatever, like if you do it incrementally, it builds up over time. Don't you're not gonna write a book in a day. You're not gonna run a marathon by training in a day. Or good luck to you if you do. You're gonna end up getting injured. I've had friends who did that. Uh, yeah. I mean, so yeah, I think the incremental gains, but really being strategic, which again we're not trained to do. We're just so used to head down doing. But being strategic about your career and life is super critical.
I really like that, like, just strategic and then just prioritizing. I do. I think when you're able to just, focus just on a couple days out, it's not so overwhelming in life. At least that's what I've come to find out. But Josh, this has been an absolutely incredible podcast episode. I would love to end this podcast episode on a positive note, any type of positive message or perhaps positive quote that you could share with our community.
Maybe I'll share two,
Perfect.
because one of these sort of came up earlier. So my favorite quote of all time, it's in the book, is that people don't know or don't care how much you know until they know how much you care, and that's from Theodore Roosevelt. Again, I'm a huge history buff. If you read his stuff, he reads like a movie star. I mean, he's phenomenal. But I love the quote. Obviously, it has to do with caring. The challenge I would give you, or not you, but like listeners, and this goes back to your point about you never know when somebody needs something the most. So every day we interact with numerous people, and every one of those interactions, we have a chance to positively impact their life. And that could be as simple as smiling at them when we walk by them on the street. It could be as simple as saying like, "Oh wow, you look great today. I love your dress or your shirt or great shoes." It could be, when you're checking out in the cashier line, just saying like, "Hey, I really appreciate like what you do," or like, "Hey, thanks for being so friendly today. I feel like like you picked up my mood just by being friendly. Like, thank you for doing that. Um, I would just say every interaction we have is a chance to positively impact someone's life. And if we start thinking about those interactions as those opportunities and we take advantage of them, I can't help but think we would be in a better place. So that's how I would end.
Josh, that is so incredibly powerful today because I think when we take the time to appreciate who's just even around us, our local community, but how a lot of the times they will hear more negative stuff than they hear, especially in like, workplace or like career, rather than the positive things that they have done. And so you're right, like kind of switching it up and demonstrating appreciation. I really do feel if we each and every one of us did that every day, even if it's a smile, it could really change our world. So, Josh, thank you so much for coming on the Plenty of Positivity podcast.
Thank you, Courtney. It's great to be here.